Well, let's actually maybe pivot over to the real episode here. I'd love to start with both of you guys introducing yourself, and then maybe Kara explaining just what the company does, just and maybe like in a 90 seconds, just so we get that.
Okay, so I'm John Allen. I'm the CEO of Ezalife. I am a career CEO. I started my first company and made myself the CEO and sold that. And since then, I've just worked with investor groups going in from the outside as they put in their funds and providing the leadership to take it generally to market and all the way through exits and secondary offerings and mergers and all those kind of fun things.
That's great. How about yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Kara Fagan. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Ezalife. My background is in go-to-market, traditional marketing, branding, digital, paid, kind of your full realm of marketing. This is mine and John's third company working together. I always joke with people that I'd probably follow him anywhere. So we're really looking forward to taking this to market and beyond.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Ezalife. Let's, how do you sort of explain it? What is it for people who have no idea? Walk us through a little bit what it is.
So it's a securement device for, we're focused on pediatrics, but anyone with a feeding tube. So our current device fits an AMT mini one. It sits on top of the skin and kind of secures the G button so it doesn't wiggle back and forth. It's really easy to clean, but ultimately it provides parents this, less worry about the G tube getting snagged on something, getting pulled out. It makes it really easy for them to feed, especially if they're on a continuous feed. Jokingly call it like a hard Band-Aid. It just sits right on top of the stomach and allows kids to do their tummy time, to be active, to go to school, or it helps an older patient, not snag or dislodge that G button.
That's great. How'd you guys, what convinced you guys that this could be a really category defining company? How'd you guys sort of think about this when you guys were looking at it maybe years ago and going, yeah, this is something we should maybe get behind?
That's interesting because, as Kara mentioned, this is our third company together. We took a long time to decide on what we were going to do. This time round, we talked to about 75 investor groups. They all had interesting companies in their portfolio, and we were introduced during that process by a VC that was kind of tracking the technology as it was being developed, et cetera, though it was sometime off going to market. And that VC introduced us to Dr. Moulton, the pediatric surgeon who started the company and whose invention it is. I guess I met with him first in person because we're both in Colorado. Really liked him, which is a super important piece of taking on new projects is the team that's there, in particular the founder, their vision, their driving force, what's their end game, which we'd never want that to be all monetary. Just really liked him and felt it was worth kind of exploring further. We had, we had a lot of background in like B2B software. There's a direct to consumer component is the first go to market in this, which Kara will talk about more here in a minute. But there's just a lot of really nice little things in the business, apart from the good it's doing and the ability for helping parents who, let's face it, have a lot going on in their lives with a child with complex needs. The feeding tube is never the illness. The feeding tube is just something they have to have because of another illness. But yet it's the biggest irritation and stress to a parent is the feeding tube, and it constantly being pulled out and then rushing to the ER. And so, there's the whole impact of being able to help those parents in some way, all the way through to the financial, as we start to build out the financial model, which we did before we even joined, to understand what are the, key kind of drivers in the business that if we're successful, the business will be successful, and can we be successful at those? And as we started to really learn about the multifacets of direct consumer sales, network effect, and the virality of one parent telling a Facebook group, all the way through to the longer term enterprise and all of that side, it was just like, there's just so many nice parts of this business that we just fell in love with it.
Yeah. And what's the decision behind the scenes between going to market right now, working with hospitals? Just how do you sort of think about that, weigh that? What are some of the conversations beforehand before you make those decisions?
So if you mean making the decision around that this is the project, this is the...
Yeah, no, I'm just talking about like which way you want to, maybe lean right now. Is it going directly to consumers? Is it partnerships with hospitals? What do those first steps look like as you're thinking about getting into something like this?
Yeah, I think, John, you said this almost a year ago, maybe now, but, we talked to one investor group about Ezalife, and the biggest thing that we were trying to convey to them is John and I aren't really people who want to just sit around and wait for this income to come, or for this product to be sold or not sold in hospitals, to be given out in hospitals and insurance reimbursement and DME suppliers. Like, that is our ultimate goal. But we don't want to do that and work towards that for 3 to 5 years. We want to get this product to people who need it most. I mean, you should hear some of the feedback we hear from the parents. They're like, oh my gosh, like, this is life changing. You know, we have one quote from a parent who, she literally says she would spend her last dollar on this. So mine and John's mindset was, how do we get this to people faster? Like, the ultimate goal is to be the new standard of care in hospitals, without a doubt. And we're going to get to that. But we believed that the parents needed this as soon as we could, you know, get it cleared and get it to market. So the emotional side is kind of what was the play for, you know, direct to consumer initially. But that long-term goal is absolutely, you know, changing the standard of care in hospitals and people being able to get this in their weekly, you know, feeding supplies from their DME. But we saw the need immediately for consumers.
What are the steps that have to be taken for you to get a product like this to a consumer? I'm assuming there's FDA, are there trials, clinical, for somebody who has no idea, right? Let's say they're just like, okay, it seems like a great idea, but what are those steps that had to be taken for us to even have the conversation we're having right now?
Yeah. So the first step, I guess, is getting clarification from the FDA as to where we fit in the kind of regulatory stable. So they were able to confirm very early on that it's an exempt device. And exempt device doesn't mean you don't have to do anything thereafter. You just go off and sell the thing, you know, over the counter or online, etc. There is still an FDA process to register it as exempt device. And, you know, a big part of that is your quality management systems and, you know, all the different pieces that they require. Should they come in and do an audit and determine that you can continue to sell, there is no audit as part of the process. You go through the registration, but you do have to do things, and the clinical trial is separate to that process, which we've just completed. But there are other trials, like usability trial. You know, does the user manual make sense? Are you selling a product on the market that only rocket scientists would actually know how to use? And
Sure.
Is it clear, you know, to the quality side, if we get feedback, positive or negative, how is that reacted to? How do we iterate? How do we change our processes, our education, etc.? I mean, it took about a year to get the FDA registration complete. We did it and had to pay the large fee 2 years before their renewal date, which doesn't shift. So we had to pay it again 2 months later, which was hard for a startup. But now we have that registration complete for the United States. And so, you know, if you look at our SOM within our SAM within our TAM right now, we are just available in the United States. Canada is next, and then Europe. The big lift is done. The creating of the quality systems. You know, you don't create a new quality system for a Canada registration. So we'll roll out to that. I suppose the other big lift is the supply chain, and there are three different stakeholders and suppliers that we rely on, all in the United States. And so the first company is the company that does the injection molding and makes the two little plastic pieces, and that snap together. They then ship the bottom piece to another company in the Midwest that puts that adhesive layer, you know, that now peels off one side and sticks the plastic onto the skin. And then it all goes to the third player, who just puts everything in the bag, you know, heat seals it. And then they're our fulfillment partner as well. So they do all the shipping. So we actually don't touch the device. So we finished the FDA process at first week in August, and then third week in August went live and made our first online sale, which was a great day for the doctor. I mean, he's been working on this for about 5 years, and
Wow.
you know, the conception that the FDA are slow and medical device takes forever. To Kara's point, you know, people raise money and they're sitting there burning capital, waiting for 5 years or 10 years to get through the process. And when you hear exempt, you think it is shorter for sure. But we get to that point much faster, and we're doing $100 sales, not $5 million machines, big expensive machines for the war. So yeah, we're up and running and super happy about it, and selling product.
So I've done a number of products myself, of just, you know, helping them go through the manufacturing, the molds, the trial and error. What was that sort of process like? You just talked about, we found our manufacturers. I'm assuming there's some steps before that of, did this work? Is it too big, too small? It didn't even have adhesive. Like, walk us through maybe just some of those ups and downs and challenges just around getting the actual unit
Mhm.
to be able to actually be shipped and manufactured.
I guess I give you this information secondhand because thankfully that all was done before Karen. Right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but I do know, I have heard the tales of frustration. You're talking, the device is much smaller than you would think. And you see the picture of the device sitting on the baby in a lot of our literature, and you kind of forget that that's like a 8-pound baby.
Yeah.
And it looks like a reason. They're actually really, really small little
Mhm.
device in reality. And so, it's got to be perfectly hinged. And don't forget, it's a snap hinge. It's got to be perfectly hinged so that it just clips in, just tick, and it's there
Mhm.
and it stays closed, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we have heard the stories of it being off by like the tiniest fraction, and you clip it down and it pops back
Right.
up.
Right.
And
Right.
it's back to the drawing board. It's not cheap, but having been done once, to do it on our second device, will be much faster and cheaper. But yeah, it goes through the 3D printer. As a startup, they were using cheap 3D printers, and the
Mhm.
accuracy of those wasn't, and so it might have seemed perfect. And then they did the exact same CAD design on the same printer 10 minutes later, and it didn't fit anymore. So,
Mm.
yeah, like I said, we came in when all the work was done to an extent.
I
Yeah.
think what's a really cool kind of background note on this, and again, this was before mine and John's time, but Dr. Moulton partnered with CU's engineering school to get this designed. So I think it's just really neat, that kind of like snippet of information because Dr. Moulton, had this great idea because he sees it every single day or every,
Mhm.
week working in the hospital. And he partnered with engineering students. Like, what a cool thing for these students to also be a part of versus just, him doing it kind of on his own.
Yeah. What do you guys see as the most significant bottleneck in anticipation of like this rollout? Like where are these bottlenecks? And then how are you pre-planning to sort of get around those?
Can we go? You want to go?
And if you've got one, Kara, by all means, fire it ahead.
I mean, I think the biggest thing in my mind or the biggest hurdle we're going to kind of come across in terms of a bottleneck is it's going to take time to get into the hospital's doors. I mean,
Mm.
it's a pretty like tight, locked kind of process. I do think once we're in, a couple, it's going to be a lot easier. But that was also kind of the one of the reasons behind our direct to consumer plan was if the parents are bringing this to, surgeons and nurses and specialists, it's going to be easier for us to be recognized to get in the door to hospitals.
Mm.
And we're already
Mhm.
seeing that. I mean, we have inbound from providers, you see them every single week. So I think our theory is working, but I do think that's kind of a bottleneck where there's just a lot of hoops and regulations you gotta have to go through to get into the hospitals. But, our consumer like ambassadors are really helping us because they're bringing this up at appointments and talking about it.
Yeah. For people who have never invested in this sort of space, medical, a device, what should they be thinking just in general, not your guys' campaign or particular, just people, for retail investors who've never been in it, when you're talking about these bottlenecks or these hurdles, are you talking 10 years, 50 years, 1 year, 3 years? Are there general estimates of like, hey, to really get into the hospitals like we're talking, most companies, it's 3 years, 5 years. I mean, how do you sort of just talk about that with realistic expectations for people?
So this world is not different to the world that the retail that has enabled retail investing, right? And
Mhm.
if I can flip that question back to you in terms of just investing, look at what Reg CF has done to the investing world. That it allows non-accredited investors who really like, whether it's what Karen and I and Dr. Moulton are doing or others, they can
Mhm.
write a check, they can take out a credit card and invest $500. And if you go back before Reg CF 10 years ago, it was this huge, well, you can't play in the game. I'm sorry, you're not rich enough, right? Or you
Right,
didn't,
right.
you didn't go to your Ivy League and now work in an institutional fund. And so that whole thing has evolved to the point that we're here talking about retail investing, right? Now you take the medical device and there's this perception of, oh, medical device takes forever and ever. And don't think that the FDA hasn't evolved like the SEC at the same time.
Sure.
And
Right,
so
right.
it's just created a different paradigm. We spoke to a lot of investors about this company, and we had this common: are we best talking to the people who invest in medical device? Or are we best talk to the people who invest in consumer packaged goods?
Mm, mm.
Because you're an over the counter, like Kara said, we're just a fancy band-aid. And
Right.
so the when you talk to the CPG investors, the funds that have very strong, particularly in a down market, their adherence to their thesis is very strong. Like, well, we just don't do medical device,
Mhm.
and we say, but we're FDA exempt. And they're like, the fact that you just used the 3 letters FDA in a sentence means this call is open. And so there is this perception that we're trying to catch up as much as you will meet people today. I meet people today, and I'm talking about retail investment. They're like, oh, wow, I didn't know that that could be done today. And the same thing is, I didn't know there was this thing called, 501k exemption or 510k exemption that means you're exempt and you can just sell over the counter very easily. So it has evolved.
So how do you, maybe this is for you, Kara, how do you think about distribution channels? And I know we've kind of danced around it a little bit, but just when you're really thinking about it, how does that, like, which of these distribution channels do you see having the highest ROI at the end of the day? Is it the hospital partnerships, direct to consumers, pediatric care networks, maybe? Just where do you sort of position and see, all right, for right now, our focus will be here, this will happen here. Like, how do you just sort of think about that as a company?
I mean, right now, I think our focus is direct to consumer. At the same time, though, we do have this dual approach. We are working with hospitals. We're already talking to hospitals. I see that's really where we can where it'll take off, right? They're going to stock, hundreds of them monthly versus, sales to consumers. And as soon as we can get that insurance reimbursement, which we're gauging, any 1 to 2 years, it's a completely different ball game, right? Like direct consumers is you're pulling out your credit card and you're paying for it. When insurance is at play, we can be in those shipments every single week with the DME suppliers. Hospitals are, not even turning a corner at us having questions. They're able to stock that inside the hospital. So I do think that enterprise kind of hospital level is where, we really start to skyrocket. But, I think the consumers are helping us every single day as well to get to that.
I think the misconception as well is that the distributors, they don't sell your product, right? At the end of the day, they enable the sale and the fulfillment of the sale and the shipping and the like the Children's Hospital Association of the United States has its own centralized purchasing platform that now that we're FDA registered, we're going through the process of getting onto that. So in terms of distribution, you still require a different sales force, and that sales force, to Kara's point, it starts with the consumers. It's the consumer that goes in with their child who's got this device on, and we, like she said, we hear this every week from a nurse practitioner. Some of them email us and say, "I just had a patient come in this morning with this device, and it's phenomenal. How do we get it?" And so in that case, that consumer, that mom or dad, has been our a form of our salesperson. That nurse practitioner, 1, 3, 6 months later, is our new salesperson that's actually selling them in multiple quantity. And then you go, through the channels up to, their pediatric surgeon or the nutritionist or whoever that gets it into the kind of enterprise level. And it is now best practice in the hospital that a kid should never go home that has had one of these feeding tubes or G buttons fitted, that they just don't go home without the securement device. And so the idea of selling this, career 30-year enterprise hospital sales guy with a leather attaché case that's going to drive from hospital to hospital and sell your product, it's the mom who goes in and says, this is phenomenal. That is our first sales force.
This question just popped in my mind. This is actually for myself. Is this a disposable product? Are you buying it a one-time thing? Or, as you mentioned, the direct to consumer, are they buying this weekly? What does the sales cycle look like?
Yeah, so it's a disposable device. We currently sell like 1-month kits. So, ideally we're on a subscription base where you're just getting it every single month. We include right now 9 bases in a pack. We're working towards even better adhesive so people don't have as many bases. It's less changing for the parents and for the child. But yeah, so right now it's a 1-month kit that we ship.
Cool. What are KPIs that you guys are measuring right now as a company?
So, the classic customer acquisition cost on our paid social and the conversion rates from, the various stages in the funnel all the way through. We found this great tool that Kara's sick of hearing me talk about called Attributely that tells us, like, on multi-touch exactly how much of that sale should be attributed to which one of, which ad campaign and which, email we sent out and all that. So we track all of that from a CAC point of view. The other one, which we're really only starting to measure into, is the virality. And so we're trying to find the right ways for, if that mom did buy the product and we got another sale from another person in the same city that probably is the same hospital, and can we connect those dots? And we use QR codes and kind of fun stuff around that. But when you have somebody come in on an organic search in Google trying to establish that they're doing that because they heard about it from their nurse practitioner that this morning is hard, but it is one of the dials in the model that if the average nurse practitioner recommends it to 2 parents a month or 5 parents a month, it makes a hell of a difference in our forecasts, as you can imagine. So for now, there's a lot of the classic go-to-market, trying to find out where you're getting your customers most efficiently from your cash reserves, which is, goes back into how your use of funds and deployment of capital that you're putting it into the. So we've used the last investment to now know where the next investment is going to be spent correctly.
Sure. Well, and it's a good segue because I want to talk about right now. So you guys are currently running a crowdfunding campaign over on Start Engine. I'd love to kind of talk a little bit about what was some of the conversations beforehand to look at using equity crowdfunding instead of the traditional models that you might have, that we talked about a little bit earlier. Just what were you guys sort of thinking behind the scenes as this would be an interesting vehicle for fundraising? And my follow-up question for that is also, how do you just think about fundraising in general for a product like this? Milestones and metrics and growth and the hospitals happen. Just how do you sort of think about fundraising in general around a product like this?
So when enough Reg D investors tell you should be thinking about crowdfunding, at some point you've got to listen to them. So we had ran a classic roadshow on a Reg D round, talked to a number of investors. Like I said earlier, the consumer investors weren't overly keen on medical device. Medical device weren't overly keen on consumer. Those that really got it and were really excited and therefore willing to actually stay on the phone and give you a piece of advice. We've some people, hey, I've looked at your deck and I don't think it's a fit for us. So, in the interest of time, let's say hi for 5 minutes. And an hour later, they're on the phone talking to us because they're intrigued like we were in the business. And as part of them giving advice, more and more we were hearing, have you guys, thought about crowdfunding? Because we think you're a really good fit for that because of, because you're that kind of hybrid company that doesn't fall into the thesis of a venture capital fund that like I said, in a down market can't deviate from what they've told their investors they're going to invest in. Whereas in the retail, if somebody says, hey, I'm a doctor by day and I understand what these guys are doing and it's great, but I know nothing about consumer go-to-market, that's okay. They can write a check and they don't have to answer to their investment committee. And I mean, one of the, if I jump ahead of your second question and the crowdfunding investment, and one of the things that I think is not really appreciated by the investor community, and I'm not sure even the repeat retail investors, do they appreciate, with crowdfunding, you have instant liquidity, the possibility. And, if you look at the classic startup that an angel investor has been investing in, they go along to their demo day and they write a 25 grand check and they're in a company and, they didn't know, but the best 3 companies of the 10 that presented on stage were already fully subscribed by the inner circle. And then they're writing these checks and they got into the companies that were probably unlikely to make it into that, 10% of the class that will actually generate a liquidity event. And they're stuck. And that 25K is either written off or it's an annoyance because it's just sitting there and they can't get the money out. And that great company from, you cut this bit out, Techstars or Y Combinator, 2004, their 25 grand check is still inside there and it's doing nothing for them.
Right.
Or they might have just put it into a certain interest account or a piece of property or whatever. Angel investors have got burned. They have got so burned, and in my mind, very badly served by those accelerators, and their money's just stuck in these companies.
Yeah.
If you look at the Start Engine model, this might need some verification from you on the timing. But someone who invests in a crowdfunding company, they can actually sell their shares on a secondary market. Start Engine run their own secondary market. They can sell those shares after 12 months to another accredited investor. And so if you're sitting there after 12 months and, when your kids is getting married and you'd love to take the 25 grand back, and it might be worth 50 grand, it might be worth 10 grand, but it's not stuck. Right. And so that secondary market thing, I think, is really underappreciated by those people who were writing 25 grand checks that might be writing 5 grand, 10 grand checks today, if at all. And so I've met a few of them and kind of said, hey, I know you've kind of closed up your startup investing because you're burnt after 10 years, but try this little new thing called Reg CF and see how you like it. So I would pitch it to non-retail angel investors to give retail a shot for that reason.
Yeah. So I love to ask this question in all my episodes because again, what we're talking to investors here, and maybe I'll bump this over to you, Kara. Ezalife makes money. Finish that sentence right there.
By selling products. I mean, mostly, no, I really believe we make money by a parent telling another parent about our product. At the end of the day, the mission and the goal for Ezalife is to help parents. I mean, I have two young kids, and while they're not medically complex, I stress over little things like sleep and schedules and tummy time and are they, getting enough stuff done. The biggest thing that we want here is for parents to tell their parents, like, you might have 5 more minutes of sleep, or you might be able to have a little less worry in your day. That's how we make money. It's parents telling parents about our product.
That's awesome. Well, where could people dive in to learn more? Where should we send traffic right now?
So the campaign page is at startengine.com/offering/Ezalife.
Awesome. Well, for all of our listeners out there, you guys have done this rodeo before. I'll have all the links in the show notes. And again, I appreciate both of you guys taking time out of your day. It's a great conversation. I always love it when you just see a product, it makes sense. It's going to help people. It's not really that complicated at the end of the day, right? It's like, oh yeah, I get it. I use the analogy. My mom's name is Cookie. I'm like, could my mom understand this? Yeah, I get it. All right, now what do we got to do here? So again, I appreciate you taking time out of your day. Great conversation, and I look forward to watching your campaign grow.
Cool.
Thanks,
Thanks, Joe.
Willie.